there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today we're going to paint a landscape and it's all about the sky today. You can use any red, yellow, and blue paint you want, but the colors I'm using are from Turner Watercolors, and this video is brought to you by jerrysartorama.com. They always have great prices on the Turner line of paints, so if you are looking for some high quality, inexpensive watercolors, give them a consideration. I'm using Gamboge, Pyrrole Red, and Cerulean, and I'm also going to be using black. So that's why you can use pretty much any red, yellow, and blue you want, because we'll have a pre-made black that will give us a really strong contrast. We usually don't use black here, so I thought that would be kind of something fun and different and, you know, give you some use for all those tubes and pans of black you probably have kicking around in your watercolor palettes because we don't typically use them. The first thing we're going to do here is just draw a mountain range. That's all. So I didn't bring out the whiteboard because it's going to be super easy. I will draw it fairly darkly with my mechanical pencil here. And I get that asked so much. People say, what do you use for a pencil? And I'm like, usually just a mechanical pencil. Even though I have so many lovely sketching sets, I just find that the mechanical pencil works really well for me. So I'm just going to hold that up real quick. I'm working on Arches 140 pound rough, and I've just taped it to the backing board of an old watercolor pad. So you can save one of those old watercolor pads or watercolor blocks. They generally have really durable cardboard that is wonderful for taping your paintings down to, and if they get too soggy or damaged, you could chuck them and you probably have another one, a spare, once you use up another watercolor pad, which is really good. I'm using the Mimic brushes from jerrysartorama.com, and I'm going to go ahead and just wet the sky area. You want to make sure that you do get it good and saturated. You could also do the technique where you wet the back of the paper and stick it down onto a silicone or nonstick mat, and then you wet the front side just above the mountain like I'm doing here. I've got a divided water bucket where I have 1/2 for dirty water and 1/2 for clean water, so that way I will be getting nice and fresh mixes in my sky. Alright, so I like to spread the water around and give it a chance to absorb in a little bit. And while I am absorbing, I'm just going to show you the brushes I have. I have a number 30 round, I have a number 4 round, and a number 12 round, and a 1-inch flat. You can find all these sizes in the value pack of Creative Mark brushes, but I did want a Taklon flat because when I'm painting the mountains, that's just going to give me a better cut in with my paint because it's a little bit springier. So, you know, you can just use the set of Creative Marks if you don't have this springier Taklon brush, or you can use any 1-inch Taklon brush that you have, even if it's an acrylic painting brush. So I'm going to start by mixing up some color. I'm going to start by making some puddles, so once I start working on the sky, I don't have to stop and get more color. I'm going to make a nice big puddle of my Gamboge, which is a slightly warm yellow. And the colors I'm using are all a little on the warm side, just to warm to neutral of the primaries. But again, if you prefer a different look, go for a different colorway. The Pyrrole Red, which is a very neutral to warm leaning red. These colors also lift pretty well because they do tend to be a little bit on the warm side. Clean my brush well. Pick up some clean water, and I'm going to grab some Cerulean Blue. And Cerulean Blue is a little on the weak side as far as other blues such as Phthalo Blue or Ultramarine, but that should keep me from getting much green into my sky. Now I know I'm going to need to make some purple, so I'm going to go ahead and make another puddle here. I'm going to make that purple with the Cerulean Blue and the Pyrrole Red. And it's not going to be a really bright purple. It's going to be almost like a eggplant color, and that's what I want. So that's a little too red there. I don't know if you can really see on camera. It might look pretty dark. And a little more blue in there, and probably a little bit more blue still. Okay, I would say we are pretty well to go. I can do my red mixing, my orange mixing on the table. I mean on the paper. I think we're pretty good to go. So now what I do is I look at my paper and I look for any puddles. I've got a puddle right there. So to tend to that, I like to grab a rag or a paper towel, and I am just going to gently blot it and try not to smudge any of that water down into the rest of the paper. And then I'll just brush over it to make sure I've got that even sheen everywhere on my paper. So if you're working with a paper, now I feel like I would need a little bit more. If you're working on a cellulose paper, that is notorious for drying unevenly. So when you come back to your paper, you might notice that you have parts that are shiny, parts that are matte looking. You want to go right ahead and either spread, if you have puddles, just spread it what you have, or redip your brush and just re-wet it so you have an even sheen. So by an even sheen, see, nothing is puddly, nothing is super shiny, everything kind of has a satin finish to it. That's what you're going for. Oh my gosh, we're 5 minutes in and we haven't even put a scrap of paint on here yet. I'm going to start with my yellows because there are some certain areas in this landscape, and I'm going to link it below. It's a beautiful sunset scene where I want to have some really strong yellows. So I'm pretty much painting this yellow anywhere I plan to have yellow or orange. And this is when I think when you're doing skies like this, you really want to try not to fuss with it too much. Now I'm going to grab some red with my dirty brush, and I'm going to add towards the top of these yellow areas. Now I'm actually mix some yellow in there because that red is super strong. Some up in here. All right. I think I'm going to blot that because that's really too bright and I don't want it to set into the paper. And then I'm going to clean my brush and just go in with some yellow. Now with the cotton paper, like this Arches, I have a little bit of a grace period as far as it staying wet for me, so I shouldn't have too many issues. I just had a drop there, so I'm spreading that out. I'm going to soften some of these colors up a little bit. I can wipe my brush off. I can go and lift up that way too if I feel like I've got a little too much red or orange or yellow or anything happening there. And now I want to go in with my areas that are going to be fairly just blue on their own. Now there aren't too many areas like that. Over here is one, so I'm going to lift out some of that yellow because I don't want to get green in my sky. And cerulean can make a decent green, so I want to just prevent that a little bit, maybe lift out a little bit up there as well. And I just wipe my brush off on my rag as I'm going. I tape my paper down. Another reason I like to tape my paper down because it wants to kind of buckle on you a bit, but also you get a pretty frame when you take your paper out. You probably know that already, but if you're new, you might not. If you're new, I'd appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. That way you will be able to find my videos again, and hit that notification bell, because that way there's a chance that YouTube might actually send you a notification. There's no guarantee, unfortunately, if you hit the notification bell that you'll be notified, but it's better than nothing, right? It's better than nothing. If you want more information on painting landscapes, I do have a landscape painting class. It's called Watercolor Landscape Workshop, and I will link that down below as well so you can go check that out. Go through painting different types of trees. We don't use black in that class. It's a traditional watercolor course. It's a lot of fun. You have 4 full finished landscapes to paint when you're done, and you get to learn all the kind of fundamentals, so when you go to paint something on your own, you're going to know what to do. Okay, now we're going to go in with our violet color. And you see a lot more of this heavier at the top. So I'm going to start in right here at the top. See how it's kind of like an eggplant color? I'm going to be careful as I place this in because I'm hoping that I won't have to go back and do much to it. Adding a little more blue because I noticed there was a little more blue in this area. You will get some grayed out shadows where some colors mix together, which is totally fine. If you get mud on your brush, clean it. Shadows are great where you want them. If you get shadows where you don't want them, that's more like mud. So it's if you intended it or not. A lot of times you'll have that purple right next to the orange because you're seeing shadows and highlights on a cloud, on the clouds together. Get a really big kind of path of it here. I also want my paint to flow a little bit and to get that texture of those clouds, because I don't want to have to mess with it. I want to have my shadow, highlights, colors, everything done in this first go. I feel like my brush might be getting muddy, so I'm cleaning it. I'm going back. I guess I didn't get as much paint as I thought I had. Going back, getting a little bit more blue. Adding a little bit more blue over here. Behind our mountain. Now, the thing you have to be careful of with a brush like this is that it holds a lot of water, so you can end up getting back runs, kind of like flooding your paper, even with a cotton paper. I'm lifting out some highlights here, so just be aware of that. There's a few areas where you'll have a highlight. You'll see a little bit of sky poking through, or you'll have a... It's mostly sky poking through. You really... Or maybe they're just, it's just the sun is... Cloud is catching a light a certain way. Or there's some mist. You want depth. You want to, it doesn't matter if you dip, if you get into the mountain a little bit, like you're getting a little overzealous and your paint goes into the mountain. That's not that big of a deal, because we're going to be using black to get our shadows in the mountain. It's, you know, it's fine. You just, I don't want to cover the whole thing because most of the snow on the mountain is going to be more blue tinted. So I just don't want to get all that sunset colors reflected, because it's not what you see. So you do want to concentrate and plan when you're doing this section of the painting that you've got time to get it done. You don't want to have to stop and start and come back to it. As the paper dries, you can start putting down your paint, and it's going to stay put a little bit more. So that's when you kind of tap in on the tip of your brush and you do little clouds, little wisps. Your more precision stuff. It's also, you start to get a little braver, which is nice. So if I don't talk for a minute, it's because I'm concentrating. Ooh, need a little more blue there. The reason I went with a muted palette today is because the sunset has a lot of gorgeous values and a lot of gorgeous color, but it's not a super vibrant sunset. So I didn't want to be tempted to go like with psychedelic colors on this. If you find that you have a penchant for mixing mud, then go with like crimson, and I would still stick with a warm yellow and ultramarine blue, and then you're going to get much brighter colors, and you might be more happy with that. But I have a tendency to go over the top with my color, so I know by restraining myself a little bit with these colors, I was going to have a better time with it. Now I'm taking some of the Pyrrole red here, and I'm dancing it in, just kind of sneaking it in there next to that purple here. I don't want to put a ton, because again, I don't want the sky to be too crazy, but I do want to get that kind of, that merging from the violet or even the gray, if it desaturated, into the, oops, make sure you don't have too much water on your brush too. You don't want to have backgrounds. I just want to kind of bridge the gap between those colors a little bit, and also just punch in some of that bright color, because you do need the bright color too. I mean, you don't want a sky that's all gray and muddy. That's a little. Well, you gotta be careful you don't, if your brush isn't too wet. And the best way to lift, I think, at this stage is just to blot your brush off, dry it off, and then go in and handle it that way. I feel like I want a little more blue on its own. You could switch to a smaller brush if you want to. Trying to find areas I can add this blue where it's not going to turn green on me. I think I want a bunch right in there too. Don't be afraid if your sky goes in another direction. You know, it's not exactly what you set out for, because it can change. You can find that a cloud happens somewhere and you really like it, so you don't want to blot it out. I like what's going on in there quite a bit. Could add a little bit more blue in there. The colors do lift pretty well, so you can go in with that brush and just kind of pull some color out if you need to. It's kind of an intense period of the painting when you're doing the sky, because you're trying to get it all done while it's wet. Now I'm going to take the Pyrrole Red, some of the yellow. That's a little too wet. Actually, I think I'll go to a smaller brush because I'm just grabbing so much water with that, which was handy at the beginning, but now it's too much. I'm going in with a number 12 round, the Gamboge and Pyrrole Red mixed together. Blot the brush a little bit and getting this orange. Be careful not to put the orange on top of the purple, because that's going to give you mud. Hopefully your paper is still wet and you can still add to your sky without getting weird blossoms. And you know what? Even if you get a weird blossom, I still think it would look pretty cool, actually, because it would be in an area that's got clouds anyway, so it probably would look just fine. And remember, your colors will shift a little bit lighter, so don't freak out if it just is like, oh my gosh, my sky is so yellow. It's fine. It can help if you tip your paper, if you're getting a lot of glare, and tip it, and then you can see what you're doing a little bit better. If you're getting mud, clean your brush. That will happen, because if you mix your three primaries together, you get either brown or gray. And that's really useful to know, but sometimes that's not what you want. So you're kind of fighting the tendency of these colors to want to mix. But if you put them next to each other, they create really gorgeous, beautiful colors. So that's what you're doing here. You're really trying to control. There's something we don't do that much in watercolor. A lot of times we just let it do its thing. And we are letting it do its thing, but we're also manipulating it a little bit. I try to balance when I'm putting my colors in, so I wouldn't put a bunch of dark stuff just in one spot, unless it was a really strong reason, like I wanted to draw the eye there for some reason. Generally, I am going to try to balance my colors around so that I have a more pleasing design that will pull the viewer's eye through the painting. As long as your paper stays damp, you can keep on messing with it, but you don't want to overfuss with it. You only want to, paint it till it's done, till you can let it dry. Unfortunately, that can be a very difficult thing to tell when you're beginning. And you'll have points where it's like, oh, I wish I stopped 2 minutes ago, and then you'll bring it back from the brink. Sometimes what I'll do too is I'll just bang it like that and get my colors moving and grooving a little bit. And that can really help the painting along. I'm still feeling like I want a little more blue. Luckily, my paper is still wet enough to add it in. And I'll probably just kind of try to add it into purple adjacent areas. Working on a rough paper, too, does prohibit it from flowing and blending too much. So if you are trying to keep colors separate, that is that's a little bit easier on the rough paper. On a smooth paper, your paint's going to want to just move and groove right into its neighbor. On the rougher paper, it's going to settle into the nooks and crannies of the paper a little bit more and give you a little bit more control. It also is wonderful for landscapes because you have that really nice texture that you can work from. If you find you're really struggling with mud, go ahead and grab a warmer red. Make the painting work for you. If you find an area you want to blend out, just kind of wipe your brush off, clean your brush, wipe it off, and then you can go in and you can lift and move your paint around a little bit. Kind of a jumble of mist and clouds here. You're less likely to get back runs also on rough paper. I feel like the purple should extend over here a little bit more. Okay. Not sure if I like this red or not. I'm not sure if I like it and would like to do it in more places or if I don't like it. So I think I'll just carry some of that pigment up a little bit. This is a great exercise for learning how to work with really strong colors. Tiniest bits of paint at this stage. This is the hardest part of the painting, so all these red areas are areas of clouds that are just being illuminated, just getting hit with that low sun. All right, let's let this dry and then we'll come back and finish her up. First, I'm gonna blot that. Seriously though, walk away from your painting, let it dry. Actually though, before it dries, I'm glad I caught this. I mean, you could let it dry and come back and do this, but I think it'll be just a little bit more efficient. Take some of the cerulean blue, a little bit of that purpley mix, or just a smidgen of red so you can make that purple. And then just kind of give your mountains a little bit of a base coat in here of that. You can leave some white showing, but you're going to want to get some color in there. Try not to bump into the sky unless you're scrubbing out a boo-boo, because we're going to want a little bit of color in our snow. You can be real textured and sloppy with this. It doesn't matter. See how I'm just kind of dancing right up to the edge. I don't want to quite go into it. Just give us something to have other than bright white everywhere. Okay, now you can let it dry. All right, the sky is dry. You may have noticed a shift from a little bit brighter to a little bit duller. That is typical with watercolor, and you can probably notice it pretty well on film, because then you see it immediately go from wet to dry. So that's why when you're doing something like a bright sky, you generally want to make it a little brighter than you think you do. We're going to make our mountain color, and we're just going to take that cerulean blue, mix up quite a bit here. And we're going to use some pyrrole red, because we're going to stick to the same colors. That you can see how strong that red is, how it wants to overtake everything. And a little bit more blue, and then we're going to add some black to that. Don't you feel a little naughty using black? And that desaturates the color. If I was to add the yellow to it, I would get more of a brown, and I would get less of a cool feeling to it because of the colors that I chose to begin with. A little bit more blue. And I don't want it super black, because we're going to have some silhouetted trees, so we're going to want to save that for later. I'm going to begin down here at this area. Make sure your sky is completely dry. And this area in here is pretty dark. A little bit of snow peeking. Using the chisel edge of the brush to kind of carve out my snow and rocks, because I mean really that's what you're seeing. You're seeing kind of where the mountain has snow on it, and where you might have some foliage, you might have some rocks poking through where the snow couldn't stick because it was too windy. You're getting all of that. And the sun is behind the mountain, so in front of the mountain we're not getting as much of the reflection of the warmer colors. You're getting more of just the reflection of the darker blue sky, which would be kind of behind the photographer. The more you paint, the more you'll notice, like when you are, say you're out for an evening walk, or maybe you're just out in the evening driving or taking a boat ride or camping or something, you'll notice the skies. You'll notice how things, how things look. And then you'll think, oh, wouldn't that be a pretty picture? But instead of just thinking that, you'll actually know how to paint that pretty picture. So you'll be like, oh yeah, I've got to keep in mind that you don't see the sunset color on this, you see it on this other area. I've got this little ridge, so I'm bringing down some lines from either side of it. I think it's really looking snowy. I'm really pleased with how this is turning out. Why am I painting a snowy mountain? I don't even like the fact that the summer is leaving and fall has arrived. Going right for the snow. Skipping over fall. Oh, we did something fallish last week. The epic over hour-long tutorial of the cornucopia basket. Let me know in the comments below if you like that real long one, or if you're ready for something easy. I guess it could be both. You could have enjoyed the long tutorial, but still be ready for something a little easier. So don't worry if it's a little messy under here. I do want to drag up some of that color. And I think I might actually, let's take some swirling blue, add it to that mix right there. Let's also add in, we'll add in some scarlet too, obviously. But let's also clean our brush and add in a little gamboge. Just a little bit. Just give that feeling that we have some foliage still making a living. I need to tap some of that in there too. Fill it in a little bit more. I think I might need to make it a little darker. Most of it's going to be covered by trees, but not all of it. And you can bring it up with that chisel edge. I do need it a little bit darker, so I'm going to clean my brush. I'm going to start by grabbing a bunch of the gamboge. Nice thing about mixing with a brush like this is that it's not as absorbent, so it doesn't hold as much water. Add in some blue. Oh, isn't that a pretty color? Add some black to that. I'm going to tip it in case you're getting glare. I'm seeing a lot of glare. I'm going to go with my number 12 round. Going to mix up more of the purpley color with just the blue and red. A little bit of the black. And kind of use that to bridge these areas together. Kind of model it a little bit. That brush load had quite a bit of red in it. Need to add a little more blue. A smidgen more black. I'm going to bring some of this over here as well. Unify this. Okay, and I think I'm going to give us a little spritz of water. I don't know if I have my little spray bottle here or not. That is not water. Right here. Just give it a little bit of a mist. And I'm just going to soften it a little bit. That's a little... soften it to make it kind of blend from the sharp detail of the stones up there to the kind of misty foreground, or midground actually. Alright, now we're going to let this dry and we'll come back with our final silhouette trees. Okay, now I've just got black on its own here because we've been progressing to black on its own. I'm going to start off, I'm actually going to work left to right just because I am right-handed. It's going to make it a little bit easier. I'm going to start with some teeny little little trees on this end. In fact, why don't I zoom in a bit? Here we go. And we'll have one that breaks the horizon up here. And I'm using my number 12 round, but if that feels a little too large, you can do something smaller. Just getting a nice conifer in here. It's just the tip of a tree, so don't be too fussy. Don't worry about it being an entire tree that's perfection. It's the tip of a tree. And trees out in nature do not look like Christmas trees typically. They are not groomed. They are windblown. And I'm going to tip it a little bit so you don't get the glare on there. And then as you get lower, you're going to have these other trees that are kind of morphing into this tree. I'll put another one, just breaking the horizon right there. You can always go in to make them taller later. You can't make them shorter though. Once that tree's in there, you can't cut it down, so you might as well start small and work up if you need to. You just want to put enough water on your pan of black watercolor so that it will reactivate, but you don't want to have, like, you don't want it real watery. You're going to see everything behind there. If you have any lighter patches or anything. That's why I wanted to mist it, so we had a fairly uniform area to start with. I don't think I've ever bought a black tube of watercolor on its own in my life because you always get it in sets and I don't tend to use it very much. And while it's important to know how to mix your own blacks, and that's why you're going to have shadows that match perfectly, it's also good just to have fun with your materials and do something a little easier once in a while, just for fun, and, you know, see if using a color is for you or not. Some blacks are really fun to work with because they granulate, and then they have interesting undertones, so when you mix them with colors, they tend to, like, they might make greens or purples or, you know, things you're not expecting. I'm not getting a ton of detail on these. I just want to kind of get different shapes, some skinny ones, spindly ones, some fuller ones. And there's like a hill or a ridge or something because it is making it so the ground slopes up where these trees are. So I'm going in and putting that in. My tape lifted a little bit when I heated it with a heat tool. That tends to happen. I'm trying to keep my nice white border though. Trying not to let the paint seep underneath. Let's put one a little bit higher here. And I'm just kind of seeing what my painting needs. I'm not necessarily following my reference photo, but use your reference photo as a guide and change it up if it makes more sense for your painting. Yeah, like I think I want, let's make this one up a little bit higher because there is a tree that looks like this. It's over further, but I'm afraid I might run out of space, so I'm going to put it in right now. I'm turning my brush at an angle so that I get each of my little brush, each time I press the brush, I'm getting like a new branch. You can also go ahead and put a drop of water on your pan of black paint, and then it will be really ready to go. I'm just going to spray mine real quick. I had put a drop at the beginning of before I turned the camera on, but it's starting to get used up. Turn your paper because it will make it easier. It's okay if you can see through some of the branches, you know, like you have little gaps in between the branches. That looks natural, looks nice. If you are in love with your whole mountain, you don't want to have much in there for trees, then you do not have to put them in. Alright, so for the kind of the biggest tree, I'm going to put it right here. I'm going to zoom back out so you can see the whole thing. Get a nice fully loaded brush. And I'm going to start by putting in the main trunk. Not that you are going to see that. I want this one to come up pretty high, give me a sense of scale here. You can even have trees that go right off the paper if you want to. It's a good idea to practice doing different types of trees so you don't just default to the same tree every time, the same Christmas tree looking tree. Shoot, I'm going to put another piece of tape down there because I really want to keep that white border, and my tape had moved a little bit. So if that happens to you, you can put another. I generally wouldn't bother. I mean, you're not going to see it under the mat, but I do like to have a nice crisp border. There we go. I can paint right up to the tape. It's nice when you have a good contrast to your sky or your mountain and you can see a little bit of detail in those branches. So I usually take my time on one tree, and the other ones I'll just kind of keep kind of generic and easier. Because if you have them all the same level of detail, none of them are going to really stand out. And that's where the phrase, you can't see the forest for the trees, comes from. Or maybe you're seeing the forest, but you're not seeing the trees. I'm just going to fill in with some dabs here until I bring it to the solid dark at the bottom. And see, we're not seeing much of that really muted green that we put down. It was more just for kind of like a, what's that, a piece of paper? Where'd that come from? There we go. Okay. And if you didn't quite get dark enough here and you wanted to go into another row, like say this was really more grayish and not pure black, you could do another row of pure black. You could build up. So you can keep doing that. You can vary your values and go layers and layers and layers and have like many hills coming towards you. And that would be really cute. Alright, so let's dry this and take our tape off. If you want to put birds in the sky, go for it. If you spattered any black paint by accident in the sky, that's a great place to put a bird. Alright, that was pretty quick. Oh, I also wanted to mention, if you don't have black watercolor, if you have some black ink, you could use that. Just make sure you clean your brushes really well when you're done, especially if you're using your good watercolor brushes. And when you peel your tape off, try to peel it off at a sharp angle from your paper so you don't tear your paper. I also find that peeling your tape off right after you heat it, even if you're just using a hairdryer, it will really help because the heat weakens the adhesive. It's also a great way to get stickers off of things. Just heat it up with a hairdryer or heat tool. And there we have our nice white border. We have our finished painting. I probably just signed that with a white gel pen or a white acrylic paint pen and call it a day. This was so much fun. It was great practicing skies with you today. Please have fun with your skies. Do not get overwhelmed and scared. It's just a piece of paper. You know what? If you painted your sky today and you're like, oh, I just don't like it. It didn't come out good. I hate it. Flip that piece of paper over and try it again. Most papers are good to use on both sides. Arches is. Have fun with it. Practice, practice, practice. A lot of times your skies probably look fine, but you doubted yourself and you messed with it, and that's why it got a little kind of overworked. So trust yourself, have fun, and practice. I want to thank jerrysartorama.com for sponsoring today's video. Please check them out if you're in need of some art supplies. I'll link to what I used in the video description along with a coupon code that you can use to save some money off of your non-sale items at Jerry's Artorama. Also, if you'd like more help with your landscapes, please consider my watercolor landscape workshop. I will also link that down below, and I would love to help you improve your landscape painting skills as well. Thanks as always for watching. Until next time, happy crafting.